sorry. We have our agenda up there. Let's start with approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, the minutes are approved. And we'll move on to the Community Development Manager update. We've got as a, for folks who don't know, that is a report in writing that's in our materials, but we obviously can ask any questions about it that we have. Paul, is there anything else you'd like to add to that report?
No, unless you have any questions. I did want to report that we had 2 additions to that manager update this month, just to talk a little bit about our capacity building exercise that we did with some of our partners a few weeks back, and there was a report from the Western North Carolina Nonprofit Pathways about how that went, to give you all a chance to see how, as HCD approved that, to see how that went and who attended, and then as well as also point out we're working on our 5-year consolidated plan and analysis of impediments. And in that memo you have, we've been distributing that pretty heavily over the last month to a variety of resources, from listservs to attending the Santa Claus event this past Friday, passing out information on getting people to fill out the survey. So we wanted to include that into materials to let people know that we're conducting stakeholder meetings as well as community surveys, community meetings, stakeholder meetings, to get input about the 5-year consolidated plan, which is our guide for how to spend home and CDBG dollars, as well as the analysis of impediments to fair housing, where we're also talking about things like anti-displacement strategy, gentrification, and other things that we're having be a part of that report. So I just thought it would be information to share.
Great. Any questions from either of you on any of that? So I have a question about the capacity building summary. The evaluation here was quite good. People seem very happy with it. How many people attended that?
For some reason, the number 13 is sticking out to me. And I'm looking at the report right now. She put that in, but I think it was about, 21 signed up and we had 13 actually attend.
And just as a reminder, people were attending this. I mean, we made it available, I think, to anyone who received a grant, but we made it a requirement for people who received either CDBG or Strategic Partnership Fund grant of over 10,000, is that right?
And it actually, this is something that I think we've talked about, it actually wasn't a requirement,
Okay.
and it's something I think we need to consider next time. We'll probably bring that back to say if everyone thinks that it is worthwhile to make it a requirement so that people have the opportunity to build the strength of their board. I think it's valuable for new to seasoned boards, so it's available, but it's been a discussion whether we can actually make it mandatory or not.
All right, well, that's good. At least it was useful for folks. Good. All right, moving on to Housing Trust Fund loan request from Habitat for Humanity. Andrew.
So this is a project that's not going to have visual support, but I can certainly describe the locations. I'm sure you guys know of some of these
Just a
lots.
little.
Sure.
Yeah.
So this project is the genesis of an approach that we made to Habitat earlier this year in response to the kind of consistent call for affordable for sale housing, what feels like attainable housing to people who live in Asheville, people who are in neighborhoods that have not quite experienced full gentrification, where prices are still attainable, but are under very, very serious threat of displacement. We approach Habitat, and we're open about our policies and perhaps their strategy. We're very fortunate to have a competent, experienced partner in Habitat in this area. And what we ask them to do is to see if they can explore within their larger strategic and funding cycle to look at projects supported at the local level that work at the lot level, at the infill level, in neighborhoods that are under immediate duress with displacement. To Habitat's credit, and they worked, found room in their cycle, and have produced what they think is the ability to do either 6 or 8 homes on lots, and we'll discuss, and I'll see Danny at a certain point, the 2 potential rehabilitation homes as well. So the structure of this proposal We will partner approximately $900,000 of Habitat funds with an $860,000 housing trust fund loan, which will open as kind of a rolling loan fund. We've identified 4 of the lots as of now. 2 are in Shiloh, 1 is in the south side, and actually I think the 4th lot is in Shiloh as well. Okay. And so what this is going to do is going to allow them to finance the construction and administration of these homes until a homeowner arrives. Habitat will submit an application to us, basic floor plans. They have a homeowner identified. We will allow them to draw on the funds to finish the home. When the homeowner is identified and closing occurs, the Habitat funding will convert to a first lien position. The homeowner will hopefully identify and pursue NCHFA and DPA funds, and the remainder of the Housing Trust Fund loan will stay in as a 4th lien, a deferred lien that will be paid off upon transfer. This is a flexible model. This is a model that we hope that we can kind of find some efficiencies in, improved in the future. But this is something that I think responds quickly to the urgency of this affordable housing issue in the city of Asheville. It responds to a lot of the voices that we hear, people who say, I've been here for 30 years, I've grown up here, I don't know if I can stay here. We have small needs and we have large needs in terms of the projects we address, but we feel that this is the type of project that we can roll consistently to produce attainable for-sale housing for people and use it with our local resources.
That's great. I want to thank Habitat for moving to this model. I had conversations with your predecessor, Andy, 10 years ago about doing this in Shiloh, and the answer at that point was no, and no. Not Shiloh, in Burton Street. So I think Burton Street is lost, unfortunately, but maybe Shiloh and some other neighborhoods are not. So I think it's a great model.
And I would point out, we chose carefully the partner we would want to work with as well on this. We know perhaps in a neighborhood like Shiloh, we want to have someone who has the community support and the neighborhood support for the project, and that's something that was very important to us, that Shiloh was accepting and understanding and wanted Habitat to build in the neighborhood, which appears that they do. And so that, again, is credit to them and the relationships that they built.
All right, any questions?
No questions, just want to commend Habitat for coming to the table. I've had conversations with Andy on numerous occasions, and I'm thrilled that this is finally coming to fruition. I believe that it's the first time that Habitat has actually come to the table with the city of Asheville and even asking for us to help subsidize some affordable housing. I'm elated that it is in neighborhoods that are staving off gentrification and trying to remain staples in the city of Asheville. I commend y'all for doing that, and as we move forward, hopefully this will become a better model that we can utilize in the future.
And I will point out one more thing, and I didn't articulate this, which is that Habitat feels, especially with the lots they've already acquired, that some of these can be available for sale at the late summer, fall of 2020. So this is a very fast model. And again, when you have an entity that's continually building and has staff, it's easy to kind of fire up that engine and keep things going. So that is part of it. This could move at a speed and a scale that we'd like as well.
I do want to say this, and correct me if I'm wrong, since advocating for some home ownership opportunities, is this not the very first opportunity we've had in front of us for actual single-family home ownership?
I think that's right.
I mean, I don't want to understate the importance of this actual presentation here. So, saying that this is the first one since we've changed policy and tried to make it happen. So, thank you for that.
Yep.
Okay. And I
Great. Andy, do
can
you want
happily
to-
give Andy some time and space if you like.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee members, it's great to hear such positive response to this from the committee. I do want to bring up one part of this, the project that we originally proposed that Andrew alluded to when he mentioned the possibility of two additional units and the possibility of a rehab component to this. One of the things that we originally presented to city staff back in May when we were talking about this is a model to use the Housing Trust Fund to guarantee long-term affordability within Habitat's model. So in any given year, we have the opportunity to buy back 2 to 3 Habitat homes. Folks sell their homes for all the same reasons that all of us decide to move and sell a home from time to time. And Habitat has within our within our model, within our mortgage structure with the homeowner, the option to buy those homes back. Right now, there's over 100 existing Habitat homes within opportunities on neighborhoods in the city of Asheville. That represents a huge investment in those communities that council has specifically identified for equitable growth, for development without displacement. And we think the ability to keep those homes affordable long-term is a critical part of that strategy. So we had, as part of this pilot project for the Housing Trust Fund, indicated our willingness to exercise that right of repurchase, rehab those homes, and resell them to new income qualified buyers. We think this is a great model for Housing Trust Fund because it creates that pool of capital to actually do that repurchase, the rehab, and resell. Those are not currently in the staff report that's in front of you, those 2 additional units. We have purchased those units and have plans to do the rehab and resale on them. We are not asking for the repurchase or rehab funds under this Housing Trust Fund Act. Ask only the down payment assistance on those rehab units. So in the spirit of the response that we just heard from the committee, we really encourage you to consider the full request of 8 units, including those 2 buyback, rehab, resale properties as well. It doesn't change the total amount requested that's listed in the staff report. You get 2 bonus units. So I'd really encourage you to consider that as part of this request as well. Again, those are ready to go. The work will begin on those units in the coming months with sale in the coming year. So.
And so just to be clear, I think the problem is that our current Housing Trust Fund policy says that we cannot use Housing Trust Fund dollars for rehab. I think, let's just have a little conversation about this. I think and y'all excuse me, I'm a little bit under the weather, so I'm not totally with it right now, but I think the original policy objective behind that language in the Housing Trust Fund was that we wanted to move away from what we had been doing before, which is giving individual loans to individual people to rehab their homes. I think in my mind it's a different story when we're talking about you doing a Housing Trust Fund loan to an entity like Habitat or MHO or any of our other nonprofit partners that do this kind of work. So I think the plan is for the staff to bring us some proposed changes to the Housing Trust Fund policy that will include that change. Is that right, Paul? Okay. So I think it's not part of the package today because it is not part of it. It is against our policy at this point, but I think we do have an eye toward changing the policy to make that happen. And we could entertain the request at that point. Is that correct? Okay. All right.
I would just point out the fact that we actually aren't asking for Housing Trust Fund for the rehab of those units, only for the down payment assistance subsidy for the buyer.
Can staff speak to that?
I'm happy to. I did not understand that was the request. So that is the first time that I had heard that it was for down payment assistance. That is within your guidelines to be able to do.
Right.
So I think given that the request is for the down payment assistance and that is included in
The policy.
then I think we would be open to making that amendment and allowing that.
So how is it not any more money? Tell me how it's not any more money.
The staff report that's in front of you is for 6 units. And I'm looking for it right now so that I can, with totals of
So the staff report, we left the previous request amount, which was $860,000, until we determined what we were going to do with these units.
Speaking to the mic,
Sure,
we
yeah,
have people actually.
sure. So,
Maybe there's one person sitting on the couch listening.
so the staff report in front of you has the $860,000 amount that was tied to the initial application, which was 8 units. We left that because this was not fully determined, and so we didn't want to walk back and put a firm number that didn't really describe the project.
And so Andy, you don't need Housing Trust Fund money for the rehab? You have other funds you can use?
That's
for that?
correct.
Okay. Well then, would somebody like to make
Yeah,
a motion?
I'll make a motion, but I do want to, address the language of doing the rehab, not for an individual, but for an entity such as Habitat. When can we see some wording changes to our policy in front of us?
So with community development, it's like almost as if we're a glutton for punishment and updating these policies. We've got fee rebate done in Luigi policy. Housing Trust Fund is next on the block for us to take a look at. We've already started examining it to a certain extent with AHAC, the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. Our plan is to examine that policy. Really, we've got to take several things from the Housing Trust Fund policy, try to streamline it like our goal, which is to make them easy, usable, and equated to a dollar amount. It depends on getting it through AHAC in January's meeting, which I think falls on January 2nd or the 9th if we move it. And then if it gets through there, then we would immediately bring it to HCD. But it might be February, assuming there might be questions in January's AHAC meeting or things that they want to address. But soon, it's totally on the docket to be next policy to be updated.
Could staff please express my concern and urgency for AHAC to get it done and not leg it out? It's very important that we get policy streamlined so we can have more of these projects coming to us, considering that this is the first policy, considering this is the first iteration of a home ownership type opportunity, and we changed policy, was it last year? Was it last year we changed?
This is June of 18.
May of 2018.
So, I mean, from changing policy to get something coming to the pipeline, to having something come in front of you that's actually ready to go, takes time. So those meeting time periods for 1 or 2 months where you want to ponder something, they need to be on it ahead of time and try to figure it out. So hopefully we can get it to us in some urgent time. And with that being said, I will make a motion to approve the request by the Asheville Area Habitat for Humanity to borrow funds from the Housing Trust Fund and proceed with this item to City Council, and to also include 8 units as opposed to 6.
All right, that is approved. And Andy, I just want to again say thank you for, Habitat has had a long and well-proven model in the work that it's done, but you are showing some really good, you and your leadership team and your board, really good creativity in responding to the needs that we have, your multifamily unit that you're doing, this individual infill, it's just really, it's great. It's really
Thank you
great.
for matchmaking as well. I know a lot of communities have a lot of parameters, and Shiloh is one community, and they stick to their guns. So thank you for the proper matchmaking and
Yeah.
that deep connection.
Yep,
Thank you.
thanks.
My only parting words for y'all is keep it coming.
All right, that's right.
All right, Luigi application for Verde Vista. Who is this? Is this Andrew again?
This will be me.
You?
And so, yes, everyone in front of them should have the staff report for Verde Vista. And to review this project, this is the second phase of Verde Vista Apartments located in East Asheville. The developer intends to build 56 multifamily rental units on a 3.1 acre parcel, and this was approved as a conditional zoning on May 28th of 2019. Based on the 56 units, they're proposing to do 6 of them affordable per the CEZ at 80% area median income. The property is situated close to transit, bus stop, as well as grocery store potential employers, all features that are in our Luigi policy. The developer submitted a land use incentive grant application in September prior to the Luigi update that was approved by council on October 22nd, 2019. The property's location and commitment to affordable housing merits a score of 40 on that Luigi scoring matrix. Again, they're here to apply for a land use incentive grant for those 6 additional units, resulting with 40 points, resulting in an award period of 4 years. For pros of the project, the proposed project will create 6 affordable rental units made available to households earning 80% or less of area median income for 20 years. And the proposed project addresses the city's stated priority for one-bedroom apartments, which continues on a side note with the Housing Authority's voucher waiting list, which contains a majority of single individuals looking for one bedrooms. A noted con is the award will commit city resources to a conditional zoning project. Prior to this application, these projects did not require financial or fiscal support. This could establish a precedent for future projects. And we did want to go over the fiscal impact for this. The parcel has a current tax value of $335,600 and pays taxes of approximately $1,439 annually. Under an estimated tax value, that new tax would be $26,592 for a difference of $25,153, which would be granted to the property owner if the land use incentive grant is approved. It would be granted to the property owner annually after payment for 4 years. So for 20 years and 6 affordable units at 80% AMI, the city will grant back a total of $100,612, which equates to $16,768 per unit of subsidy, which is in line with our estimates from consultants about the subsidy needed for 80% area median income. And then in years 5 through 20, we will receive that full property tax value over those 16-year period for approximation of $425,472. And the motion here from community development staff is to deny the request from Verde Vista to utilize the land use incentive grant to support these affordable units.
Okay, thanks. Bob, are you here for the applicant?
Good morning, council members and committee members. My name is Bob Ost with the law firm of McGuire Wood Bissett. Here with me this morning are Warren Sugg of Civil Design Concepts, with the engineers of record for the project, and Tom Egan, who is here representing the owner of the project, owner and developer. And we're here on an application for a land use incentive grant for Verde Vista, phase 2 of Verde Vista, on Bleachery Boulevard. Let me go ahead and, don't have the capability to display this stuff, but I do have a booklet for you all. It's no new information. I want to thank Paul for his report. The project was approved back in May of this year as a conditional zoning. One of the conditions of that conditional zoning was that the developer provide 10% of affordable units, which translates to 6 units in a 56-unit building. Other benefits, and there were a lot of them, and some of these were conditions, some of them weren't, but there are a lot of benefits. The developer is relocating and building a bus shelter, making some pedestrian walkability improvements. The developer arranged for a license to use River Ford Parkway, which is the road that runs down through there, which was pretty important. It's a private road, and so a license was required. This was important to the transit department, whom we met with before this project got to council. And so affordable housing and transit are 2 of the issues that are at the forefront of this project. We know those are important to the council. It's a good project, meets a lot of the council's goals and objectives, and of course, you know this because you considered the project and approved it back in May. Under the staff review, as Mr. D'Angelo mentioned, it scores 40 points. It's a pretty strong evaluation. And so with that in mind, the staff recommendation for denial is a little bit hard to understand, and it's apparently only based on the fact that the grant application was submitted after conditional zoning had been approved. And because the policy had changed from the time we submitted the project until now. But I want to briefly talk about the merits of the project. I'll get to that in a minute. I want to briefly talk about the merits of the project and get Mr. Sugg, if he could, to explain to you some of the strategicness of the location here. And just to, it is, I don't know if we don't have a way to explain that, but you might want to just step over here and show the committee.
Warren Sugg, Civil Design Concepts. I apologize, I didn't know we weren't gonna have,
Can we not? It's, yeah. That's so washed out. Is there a way to make it less bright? Is that part of the problem? Well, the good news is Dan is here. That was better for a second.
I'll point and get close.
Okay.
So Warren Sugg, Civil Design Concepts. So we've evaluated this site for a number of different years for a number of different developers, and this is the project that has gotten to this point, even going before City Council and receiving approval. It is a difficult site given its topography, and it is sort of a remnant of the phase one of Verde Vista. So that's a little bit of the background history. You know, we have looked at it for single family, looked at it for many different things, and this has been a great fit. As Bob mentioned, and as you've heard in some of the discussion, we are very close to transit. That was one of the main things that was discussed, and it was actually worked out with the traffic engineer to improve upon the transit facility that's there. Currently, it's right behind Kohl's, and I'm gonna point, right here, and all it is just a sign. And what we were asked as part of that approval process to actually put in a shelter. Also having to put sidewalk along Bleetree. There's already sidewalk along the other side of Bleetree, but to sort of formalize that. The proximity, this is well within a half mile of the River Ridge Marketplace, as well as the River Bend Marketplace. Just a reminder, there's Walmart, there's Kohl's, there's PetSmart, any number of different places, such as the K&S cafeteria. There's also a very close proximity to the Oakley Elementary School. It's right around 3,000 feet from this site to that. And then also just a little over a half mile to the library, Oakley Library, and to that park as well. So for all those different reasons, this site is very close to a lot of different urban centers and a lot of places that those that are using the facility would have close proximity to and connectivity. Yeah. Any other questions for me from a site perspective? Thank you for your time.
Look, this for such a small project, there are a lot of good things about it, and Warren covered some of those. We've already talked about the affordable housing, the proximity transit, and the other things that got points on your point rating scale. Like a lot of conditional zoning matters, the conditions on this project were being negotiated at the last minute, and affordable housing was one of those conditions. And Councilmember Bayfield, you may remember that you and I had a couple of telephone conversations the weekend before this. But I know how important affordable housing is to the city and to this council, and so I urged the developer to consider it. And when I did that, when I talked to him, I said that there are incentive grants available to assist you with this. It is setting the policy, they evaluated it over the weekend, ran the numbers on the project. They came back on Monday or even as late as Tuesday, said, yeah, we can do this. I point that out to say that we had no opportunity before the council meeting to come to this committee and seek the approval for the grant. But when we submitted the grant back in September, nothing was said about the possibility that it this eligibility might be in question because it was submitted after the conditional zoning was approved. And had we known that the sequence would be an issue, or the sequence of these applications would be an issue, we would have delayed the conditional zoning until we got this committee's approval for the grant. I worked with this policy with Judy Daniel back in 2010, and it is intended to help developers who might be on the fence with affordable housing get over that fence and provide the affordable housing, meeting the city's needs, the developers' needs, and everybody walks away with a better city. I think it's fair to say that without this, the developer might not do affordable housing, might not do the affordable housing. It's a good project, it's a strong project, and we think that it had every chance of getting approved by the council, even without the affordable housing. It was unanimously approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission without affordable housing, and so this was something that we did because we knew it was important to the city. Here, the policy did exactly what it was supposed to do. It clinched the deal on affordable housing between the city and the developer, and that purpose should not be frustrated because of a policy change that occurred after we submitted our application for the grant. But even if you think you have to follow this new requirement, your policy allows you to grant an exemption for good cause, and we submit that we've shown that good cause in this application. So we asked for the committee's recommendation to council for the award of the grant based on the points as computed by the staff. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
So Bob, I think the issue here is not, for me anyway, the old policy versus the new policy. It's the fact that the developer received a conditional zoning that requires these 10 units and was obviously able to make that work from a financial standpoint without regard to the benefit of Luigi. And, I think and I would say for probably 2 years now, we had a policy, it's an unwritten policy, but it's the way it's happened, that anytime there is a Luigi and a conditional zoning, that they have come to us at the same time. That was a request of Councilman Kapoor right after he got on council, because he wanted to see the full package of a project as it came together. So, and I realize, that can be a challenge in terms of timing sometimes, but the fact remains in this case that there is a conditional zoning that requires 6 units of affordable housing without any additional benefit or incentive from the city. And so my problem is my challenge here is the idea of creating an incentive where frankly we don't need to right now because it's already required. Now, I would be perfectly happy to have a conversation about entertaining Luigi for 6 additional units of affordable housing, and having the Luigi apply to those 6 units. But I'm personally having trouble getting over the hurdle of providing an incentive for something that at this point is already required as part of the project.
I would,
Pardon, I'm sorry.
I would completely concur with Chairwoman Mayfield here. The conditional zoning that was done in council included, was a condition to do the affordable housing without any additional subsidy. And at this point in time, it seems counterproductive to come back and add to that. Now, as Councilwoman Mayfield said, I would be open to 6 additional units with Luigi, but not as it stands from the conditional zoning standpoint that was already passed at City Council.
I agree with them as well. I think the original intent was for you all to kind of feed into our affordable housing dream vision, and you all met that, and we agreed. So the afterthought that we would have to subsidize it kind of seems like an afterthought.
Well, it wasn't an afterthought. It was, I explained to you all how this came up, and this was a condition that was negotiated at the last minute, and the opportunity just didn't exist for us to come to this committee first before we got the conditional zoning. Without, I suppose we could have asked for a continuance, and it was, but it was the developer will tell you that if the grant's not available, the project may not work.
Well, when you came to council without any affordable housing, is that correct?
When we first filed the application, the
The
project was
original
not.
project was without affordable housing, and as a condition of the zoning, you included affordable housing, and you thought you could make that work. That's part of the zoning then. The conditional zoning has been granted.
And we thought we could make it work with the grant that was available, which I sent to Mr. Egan the weekend before this got to council. And they ran the numbers and decided, yeah, this can work if we get the grant. It was not a condition of it. It'd be difficult to put a condition on the condition, but that was, it was,
I don't recall that being presented to us in council like
well,
that. By
well,
my memory, we've done so many conditional
Yeah,
zones.
no, I don't, I mean, I think
Certainly
if
will.
that had come up at that point, if you had said, you know, we can make this work based on Luigi, I think at that point, probably we would have said, okay, then let's wait, let's go through the Luigi process, and then let's bring it all back together, unless there had been some time crunch on your end to get approval to get the conditional zoning. But I don't remember anything about that coming up in that conversation either.
well, yeah, I have emails that indicate that it was not discussed at council. I checked the minutes, and I can't find that it was. I haven't looked at the tape of the meeting, but it was, I know that the availability of the grant was something that was discussed. Perhaps individual conversations with council members or in conversations with the staff, and I acknowledge it was not brought up at council, but at the time, we were, the requirement to submit the application before council approval wasn't in the policy.
No, but again, from a practical standpoint, the purpose of this policy is to incentivize private developers to include affordable housing in their developments. If affordable housing is a condition of the approval and the applicant agrees to that, then the incentive no longer needs to apply. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, here's what I would suggest is that I think if you wanted to go back through the process and come before council, I mean, I think this could go a couple of ways. You could, if you were willing to entertain an additional 6 units of affordable housing with Luigi applying to those 6 units, that's something I think we could vote on here today. Alternatively, you could go back through the entire conditional zoning process, asking for Luigi for 20%, but I think you're sort of meeting a wall here in terms of Luigi for the 6 that are already required. I don't know what the numbers look like if you do Luigi for 20%. We're not gonna recommend Luigi for 20%. I think we would be willing to recommend Luigi for an additional 10%. But I think if you went back through the process and suggested Luigi for the 20, back through the whole process, that is something that might be successful. I haven't talked to my, obviously, fellow council members about that, but those are the 2 options that I see.
I believe we owe this applicant a vote. I would suggest a motion to deny the request to utilize the land use incentive grant to support the production of the affordable units. That is my motion.
And I forgot to do this, is there any, on the previous one, but is there any public comment on this vote? Okay, then it is unanimous that we are taking the staff's recommendation to deny the request.
Now, will this still come before council?
It still moves forward to council, they would just go with the vote from HDM.
Agenda back up.
We have the Ashley Cox.
Right, the application for Ashland Cox.
Okay, the Luigi application for Ashland Cox with Tribute.
Yep.
All right. So Tribute Companies has applied for a land use incentive grant for their development at Ashland and Cox per the Luigi policy adopted by City Council and amended on October 22nd, 2019. The development will consist of approximately 488 rental apartments with 10% of the homes proposed for 80% of area median income for 20 years. The project as presented to staff meets the following eligibility requirements. The proposed development consists of 2 or more dwelling units. At least 10% of the units will meet the affordability standards set by the City of Asheville for households earning 80% or less of the area median income, AMI. The affordable units will be affordable to and leased to income eligible households for at least 20 years. The proposed development is located within the city limits. The proposed development provides residents convenient access to jobs, schools, and services, and the proposed development must be 70% residential in use based on square footage, not to include parking structure if applicable. Per the Luigi scoring matrix, this location and build would score 80 points, which would equate to 16 years of the Land Use Incentive Grant in the amount of the city property taxes payable to the Ashland Cox development. This proposal, again, for affordable rental housing, proposed is 49 units affordable to households at 80% AMI or less of the area median income for 20 years. Rental assistance, the proposed project will accept 10 housing choice vouchers, rental assistance in the community, and the superior location efficiency where it's close to a half-hour bus stop, central business district, and 1 mile from a job center, and within 0.5 mile of a transportation amenity. Again, with a score for 16 years of property tax grant. The pros and cons are listed, but I want to go through the fiscal impact here. The parcels currently have a combined current tax value of $4.1 million and pay taxes of approximately $17,585 annually to the city. Under the estimated tax value, the annual city tax will be approximately $386,000. This difference of $368,425 would be granted to the property owner annually after payment for 16 years. For 20 years and 49 affordable units at 80% AMI, the city will grant back a total of $5.9 million over the 16 years of the Luigi, which equals to approximately $120,000 per unit of subsidy, which is higher than the estimate of the $80,000, up to $80,000 in subsidy for a unit at 80% AMI, as discussed with our Lord Act Sargent consultants, as well as the affordable housing workshop presented on September 6th. In years 17 through 20 of the affordability period, the city will receive the approximately $386,000 annually in city tax revenue, or a total over the 4 years of $1.5 million in property taxes. Please note that the city will still receive property taxes of approximately $17,585 per year for years 1 through 16. The suggested motion is that to approve the Land Use Incentive Grant and move to full city council on December 10th with a $80,000 per unit subsidy. And Chris Day, I believe, is here to represent the developer. I think he'll want to talk unless you have questions for me.
Can you talk about what's the makeup of the housing choice vouchers, the 10 housing choice vouchers? So 10 are going to be reserved, but what are the units?
They will be, I understand, 1-bedroom units, I believe.
Chris Day with Civil Design Concepts. I don't know that the unit matrix has been made up on those vouchers, and what how we had clarified it was 20% of the affordable units, which equates out to, I think, 10 units would accept the vouchers. I know in the conversations we've had, the highest list, I think, of folks on the voucher list, I understood, was for 1-bedroom units, but we haven't tried to specify that yet in the programming.
Is that your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to know the makeup of the bedroom mixture. That's all. Thank you.
My concern is, once the housing choice voucher is accepted, what's their cost out of pocket?
So that would be determined individually per the housing authority based on their individual income. The voucher closes that gap. So depending on that voucher holder's income, they'll pay that individual rent, and the voucher will cover the rest per the housing authority standards. And I have those rates up on my computer if you wanted to know what those rates are. But they only pay their portion based on 30% of their total gross income, so that their housing costs are aligned with what our housing costs should be per HUD.
And the voucher payment covers the rest?
Correct.
And so so the voucher payment could be different for different people in this same development.
Correct, it depends on what their individual or family income is, and then they base it on that 30%. Correct.
And do we think we would have any trouble filling those 10 units?
I do not.
Okay.
There is quite the list from the Housing Authority, and
Right.
again, just at last 2 weeks ago's Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, hearing the number of people on the waiting list, a majority of the folks on the waiting list for Housing Authority vouchers, and who have them are single individuals looking for an efficiency or one bedroom.
Any other questions?
No, I think, again, correct me if I'm wrong, this may be the first project that I'm seeing coming forward under Luigi that accepts the housing choice vouchers as well. So this is not to be understated. And hopefully we can continue to work these sorts of things into our process of continuing with the housing choice vouchers. I would hope to see more as we progress, but this is a start.
So similar to the info work that we're trying to accomplish for homeownership, this is also something that the team looks at, where we're getting more for-profit developers to tackle that 80% area median income and also consider the housing choice vouchers as per the policy change adopted October 22nd.
Thank you.
Okay. Wyatt?
Madam Chair, members of the committee and city staff, I'm Wyatt Stevens of Robertson Stevens. It's a privilege to be here today on what I consider to be a very significant project for the city of Asheville. This will be, to my knowledge, the first time that a private for-profit developer is willing to create almost 50 affordable housing units in downtown in the south slope of the city of Asheville and do that many housing vouchers. I was involved in conversations with David Nash about that, and he shared with me just the reality of the wait list and the challenge of finding spots for those folks. And he said, I would ask that you consider your client consider allowing vouchers. And then in turn, I reached out to Mountain Housing because they've had a wonderful experience with working with the Housing Authority, working with vouchers. And Cindy Weeks, who happens to be here today, she said, you know, Wyatt, the program works beautifully. And we have not had any issues with that program, and we would strongly encourage you and other private developers to do that. And so I went back to the folks at Tribute, which is a family-owned company. Mark Maynard started it in the late 1980s. His son Matt works for the company. He's very involved in this project, and his two brothers work there. It's all four of them. And I said, I want you all to consider doing vouchers, and they thought about it and they said, we'll do that. This is a significant project. Not only will it create up to 50 affordable units, it's 10% of the total. Right now, they're projecting 488 units, could be more. But it's also going to create a almost 1,000 space parking deck, up to 80,000 square feet of commercial space. Architecturally, I don't know if you all have had a chance to see this. You'll see it at City Council. It's a spectacular project, and they have already spent more money than most developers would to try to create a signature project. They have, redeveloped the Chrysler Building and constructed a building right across the street. And wonderful additions to the South Slope. They did that at a time when there was almost no development happening in the South Slope. But that's the kind of project that they deliver. They're based out of Wilmington. They are getting ready to get a CO on an apartment project down there that will have 10% affordable housing down there, 36 units that they're creating. And they're committed in the city of Wilmington, where they're based, to try to do that on every project. And so they knew that when they were going to build a project of this magnitude for the city of Asheville, they needed to do the right thing. But they simply cannot do it without a Luigi grant. A project like this project is extraordinarily expensive, both from land acquisition costs as well as just the quality of the design, the size of the project, the amount of steel and concrete and things of that nature is very expensive. So when they approached me, that was before the Luigi grant was revised, but even under the old policy, we looked at it and, they were counting on a Luigi grant. When they went to lenders like US Bank, they said, this is a project we want to build, but we want to do 10% affordable. They were, they in conversations with the lender about, well, how will that work? I said, well, if we get a Luigi grant, we'll be able to save that money on the city taxes, not the county taxes. They'll still pay on the county taxes. And the response that they're getting from their lenders is, yes, that will work. The cap of $80,000 per unit over 16 years does create some heartburn. I will tell you, on the part of my client, we had conversations as recently as this morning, because this just came up yesterday. They're willing to agree to that for purposes of seeking approval today. They're still crunching the numbers on whether that will work. Their preference would be to simply follow the policy, because the way the policy works, the city doesn't lose any money that it's currently getting. It's just simply the increase in value, which will be what it is. The taxes for a period of time on that increased value the city won't receive, but in turn the city gets these affordable units. So I just want to flag that issue for you and let you know that it could well be that if this project is approved today, and if it's approved at City Council, we may be back in front of this committee next year when we start working with lenders that say, we either can agree or we can't agree to that. We may have to revisit that cap issue. I just wanted to flag that.
And sorry, say that again, the cap on.
Yeah. So the calculation under the policy, there would be no cap. It's simply you determine, the tax office, they go and determine the value of the project, and then you pay taxes based on that. The way the Luigi works, if you qualify.
We're putting a cap on it.
You're putting, the staff is recommending a cap. That cap is consistent with the study that the city commissioned that projected the cost for, per affordable unit at 80% of AMI is $80,000 in today's dollars, which makes sense, except when you consider it's $80,000 per unit over 16 years, and of course, inflation and so forth. And what could happen is that as the tax value rises, because they revalue it, then my client could be having to pay increased taxes, but be capped at the subsidy, and it could just create a problem for their lender when they're trying to approve, if that makes any sense. So I'm not asking for any deviation from the staff recommendation. Paul's done an excellent job of looking at this, but I just want to mention that we may have to come back on that particular point. But at this point, we would ask that this committee approve this request. This is the project that the city's been looking for, I think. It does a lot of things, and it'll be something that I think we're all proud of. But we can't do it without the grant. Thank you.
Any questions for Wyatt?
I don't have any questions, but I can say that the community has a bit of a heartburn concerning this project. While it does align with our South Slope plan, neighboring communities who know Ashland Avenue to be a red line community, they're kind of looking at how massive this project is, and it's kind of distressing to that community to see this type of project go forward. I think it'll be good news to share that we have some affordability there, and you all are connecting with the Housing Authority to offer 10 units to our lower income community. But while we're kind of sharing where our heartburn kind of burns, I think this community will look at this project as definitely a gentrifying factor. I just want to put that out there, just from my heart. According to the policy, I guess we're ready to move forward if anybody else doesn't have remarks.
I have some remarks. I'm gonna vote for this, but I will will say in the sense of, it's a good project. It's not a great project. It's a good project. I like the affordable units. I wish it would be a little bit deeper. I hope that in the future we can package some things together. From a Luigi standpoint, when people come to us, applicants come to us for a Luigi, and we see that, okay, for instance, this is 20 years, 49 affordable units at 80% AMI. I've been wanting 60% AMI, and maybe is there anything else that we can do when we see this? When we see, okay, it's a good project, but it's not a great project. I mean, it gives us a little bit of what we want from a city standpoint, but it doesn't give us everything we want. How can we jump in and say, okay, how can we make this project better? How can we deeper subsidize these units? And I think that's what we need to be looking at, because honestly, I kind of almost felt like you almost talked yourself out of my boat. It's a good project, it is. But we, as a city, need to look at when we get these projects that have the 8% AMI, and, you know, applicants come up and they're pumping their fists at this type of stuff. What can we do to help your project become a great project? And deeper subsidize these units and put more affordability into these sorts of projects, and speak to some of the things that Councilwoman Smith has talked to when you are butting up against certain neighborhoods that are fighting on gentrification and redlining that has happened in the past. How can we help restore that? And so that's my message, not necessarily to the applicant, but to staff. So because you all get these projects before we even see them. And so if you already know that it's an 80% AMI project, what limited tools do we have, or how can we expand that to make it, to get deeper? Because I want to get deeper, because it seems to me, within these last couple of things we've got here today, everything's at 80% AMI, and I don't like that. Just being honest with you, I mean, it's not great. I'm not gonna tout it as great. I'm gonna vote for it because I know we've got some affordability that's in there.
I just wanted to say thank you, Keith. Just two things, that the 10 vouchers are at the 60% AMI.
No, I know those are.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then something we're doing with community development as we're building these relationships, some that already exist for our partners who are doing the under 60% AMI, and then others that are doing 80, is we work with them on these projects and try to get the first one based on how they can work. And then once we have that one project, then the next time they come back, it's like, that went pretty well. It was, you know, we joke, it was a good date, and now what can we do on the second time around to be like, can we maybe do 40% of the vouchers? Can we maybe get a few more units? And so that's something that we're trying to do in community development, to build those relationships and gradually build up to where it's more of a community win.
So Paul, I do want to say thank you. Don't take my comments as me denigrating staff on anything. It's just me. If I don't feel like I say it, then it's not there. It's not me. It's not in the atmosphere. So I want to just put it out there. I'm going to support it. I'm going to ask for approval of it. And if you come back with other projects in the future, just understand that I can't speak for everybody, but that's what I hope we are looking for, is a deeper subsidy when you come in front of City Council for these sorts of projects.
I understand. On this one, I would just say it's, for all the reasons I explained earlier, it's an extraordinarily expensive site. It just makes it challenging. I mean, ultimately, the lenders, they don't care what our goals are for the city. They care if it cash flows.
Yeah, I think when we had our, what was it, when we had that affordable housing, back in September, we talked about some goals that the city had. We thoroughly, I believe, every council member should thoroughly understand that when it comes to asking for affordable housing from private developers, the city has to take on a larger role, whatever that may be, to help deeply subsidize that project to get what we want. We understand what your struggles are or what your client's struggles are in bringing a project forward, and all of the soft costs that they may have to go through in order to get a project even up on its feet. And then when you get to this level, for someone to sit and say, hey, we need it to be subsidized deeper. So going into a project, if you feel it, and this is for your clients, going into the project, if they feel that they're gonna be in front of local government asking for subsidies, to understand what the goals of the local government are. You know, if you don't have to come to us, you can just do whatever you want. But if you are gonna come in front of us, understand that we are really looking for deep subsidy on some of these things, and we're willing to come to the plate to help you make the project work. It's not, I don't think we really turn down much of anything because we are really willing to make this thing work for our community for the future. So appreciate the project. I will entertain a motion, but, Chair, entertain a motion.
But you make that motion. You make it. Yeah, go ahead and make a motion and we'll do a second.
I'll make a motion to approve the land use incentive grant and to move this to full city council. It says here specifically that we want this on a specific agenda, is that correct? So for December the 10th, with a maximum of $80,000 per unit subsidy.
That is my understanding that that is when this project comes before council for conditional zoning approval.
That's correct.
So to the point made earlier, bringing them all together. Thank you. Thank you. Second, all right.
Excuse me, just to clarify for the record, it should, it does not say this in the motion, but it should say a maximum of 80,000 per affordable unit.
All right, let me restate the motion. I will withdraw the motion and I'll restate it. I'll make a motion to approve the land use incentive grant to move to the full city council on December the 10th with a maximum of $80,000 per affordable unit with subsidy.
All right, any public comment on this project? Cindy?
Good morning. I wasn't planning to speak today, but I was just coming to catch up with y'all. But I'm glad that you all are encouraging private developers to include housing choice vouchers, 80% units. It's a way to get these units into these higher income developments and kind of, I guess, soften the gentrification in a way. And so anyway, I'm glad to hear that you're doing this, and I appreciate your efforts on behalf of our community.
What's your name, please?
Cindy Weeks. Anyone else? Okay. And let me, sorry, I'm just going back and looking at these numbers for a second. So even though, and I'm sorry, as I said, I've got a bit of a cold, so my head's a bit, not quite as sharp as I normally am. So the 16 years of Luigi would be $120,000 per unit of subsidy, but the recommendation is that we cap it at 80. That's the cap that you're talking about. Okay, and so the very big number, that 368,000, that's at 80%. I mean, that's at 80,000. Okay. Yeah, I think, I mean, 80,000 is so much more than our, when I got on council 4 years ago, the average was, or we tried to not exceed 20,000 a unit, and we've just blown through that just because of the cost of development and because we're seeing more development in downtown, which is what we want. And then the real subsidy on this, obviously, it blows through that as well. So, yeah, I guess I'm obviously going to support it too, but Wyatt, I would say, if it ends up not penciling, I hope you'll come back, because I think this is a very good project.
So just so you all are aware, when we come back to you with the Luigi, one of the challenging parts of this policy is to determine what that future taxable value will be. So if you talk to the tax assessor's office, you get a number with limited information. The developer may have a number. So we are working very hard so council knows what the subsidy is. And even as detailed as we can get it at this point, it will change in the future. And so not having a cap on it really limits our ability to know how much money the city's putting into the project. That's one of the things that we're looking into with this policy now that we have made these changes.
Right. It is, yes, and, again, we're not sort of losing anything out of pocket because it's just revenue that we're not getting, that we would have gotten that we're not getting. And there is a cost there, obviously, but, it's different than us sort of, laying out money that we currently have.
So we're trying to combine that with the balance of understanding the but-for, like what part of that the developer can do, and so that the subsidy is shared by both the developer and the city, knowing that we need to do more, and we understand that now. But trying to find that balance and truly understanding it is what we're digging into further, and the reason that we have removed the next item from your agenda for consideration.
Great. All right, so there's a motion and a second, and no other public comment? Great, and we are all in favor of this project. Thank you. And that is all of our agenda, so we'll move into public comment generally, and public comment generally.